Hello, I'm Nadia Ely, and welcome to Grid Resiliency and Beyond. This series showcases the leaders and subject matter experts who highlight the strides and innovations Dominion Energy is making. Today's discussion covers Dominion Energy's solar solutions. Here to tell us more are Erich Fritz, Manager of Business Development and Power Generation, and Mike Nestor, Manager in Distributed Generation. Thanks for being with me. Erich, let's start with you today. How is Dominion Energy expanding its solar energy portfolio, and are there long-term goals for solar power integration into the overall energy grid?
Definitely, Nadia. And I'll start with saying that solar is a key part of our reliable, affordable, and increasingly clean energy mix going forward. And we've been working steadily over the past many years to bring more and more solar online to serve our customers here in Virginia. Just last week, we filed our latest proposal to the Virginia State Corporation Commission of new solar totaling more than 1,000 megawatts, which would bring our total solar development to 5,700 megawatts, the second largest solar fleet among utilities. Also last week, as it was a kind of a busy week for solar, we filed our latest integrated resource plan in Virginia, which is our key planning document that we submit to our regulators outlining the potential pathways to meet our growing needs of our customers. The integrated resource plan calls for approximately 12,000 megawatts of incremental solar over the next 15 years. So quite a bit of solar potential build out there. The plan also incorporates the requirements from the Virginia Clean Economy Act, which for those who are familiar with it was a piece of legislation that was passed in 2020 by the General Assembly, which calls for us to build 16,100 megawatts of solar by 2035. Not all of that 16,100 megawatts of solar in the Virginia Clean Economy Act is the same. Some of the projects will be owned and operated by the company. Some, Dominion Energy Virginia, will procure the energy capacity and renewable energy certificates from third-party owned projects through arrangements called power purchase agreements. Additionally, of the 16,100 megawatts are in the VCA, 1,100 of those megawatts are required to be 3 megawatts or under, each of which are called distributed solar, as they're generally connected to the distribution grid rather than the transmission system. And we have a team that's actually dedicated to focusing on those projects that are 3 megawatts and under. For those that are owned by the company, we originate those in kind of two ways. One, through a request for proposal that we have out annually. It's a process by which we acquire projects from third-party developers that are busy in Virginia developing projects. And the others, we have an internal team which develops projects from the ground up, essentially originating the real estate, going through the diligence process, through the permitting process, to develop the projects that will help us meet our solar goals going forward.
Thanks so much, Erich. Lots going on for sure. Mike, turning to you now, can you explain what solar interconnects are and how they affect the resiliency of the grid?
Certainly, Nadia. It's a very highly regulated process, and it's not just for solar interconnections. It's actually for any generation source that desires to operate in parallel with the distribution grid. We deal with 3 jurisdictions, and each jurisdiction has their own set of interconnection regulations that we're required to consistently administer regardless of who the interconnection customer is, even that of our own utility. And the 3 jurisdictions are the Commonwealth of Virginia, the state of North Carolina, and actually even FERC jurisdictional interconnection requests if they desire to sell, if the generator desires to sell into the PJM market. So the interconnection process is really geared to identify what grid and protection modifications are needed to accommodate the proposed interconnection, but yet ensure the safety, reliability, and operability of the grid for all customers. Because originally the distribution grid was really just designed for one-way flow, providing power to those of our retail customers. But with the interconnection process and with solar and other generators attaching to our distribution grid, our technical teams, through this interconnection request process, is actually trying to redesign our grid, our distribution grid, to accept bidirectional flow. So those modifications could incorporate reconductoring to larger conductors to be able to accept the flow that the generators are providing. It could be involving converting to a higher operating voltage, where we might have to convert some of our 12.5 or 13.2 kV distribution to 34.5 kV. And in some cases, we actually have to do substation transformer upgrades to increase the capacity in order to accommodate, the aggregate generation that's being added to our distribution grid. So all those upgrades, certainly affect the resiliency of the grid. It provides additional capacity for, not only the generators that are connected, but, hopefully puts Dominion in a better state in the future to accept future interconnection requests.
And one thing I'll note, Nadia, on the processes that Mike described, whether it's for distribution interconnects or even the transmission interconnects, for the projects that Dominion Generation Business Development Team develops, we have to essentially be functionally separate. There's laws and regulations that are in place that ensure that the transmission and distribution functions are separate from the business development functions, such that when we're interconnecting, we have projects that are interconnecting that we're developing, we're treated essentially just like we would any other third party in the market that's developing a project. So as we think about our planning processes, we are functionally separate from Mike's team or the transmission team, and we have to plan just like any other third party would as we think about interconnecting our solar projects to the grid.
Excellent points from both of you. Thanks, Mike and Erich. Erich, I'm going to stay with you. You talked a little bit about the regulatory process earlier in the podcast. How does Dominion Energy collaborate with external stakeholders to facilitate successful implementation of solar projects?
That's a great question. And a lot of it really is I think, in the local process in the community. It's critically important for our projects that we're developing that we engage within the communities in which our projects are located. So as projects start to take shape and we have a large pipeline of projects that we're developing, we'll generally engage early with local officials on new solar projects in the area to ensure that as we're shaping projects from kind of those early stage contracts to more detailed, we're getting an understanding of how receptive the community is to where our projects are potentially going to be located, what things we need to be considering, because we want to be good community partners to the areas where we're going to be locating projects and engage stakeholders in a meaningful way. Once projects have kind of generally taken shape, and we have more details to share with the public, we'll hold things like open houses. We'll have mailers out to let folks know what we're planning on doing and what the project's going to look like. We'll engage through those open houses to get feedback from the community, and if necessary, and to the extent practical, we'll follow up on those concerns and potentially even take actions which may alter the direction of how we develop a project. We want to be a good community steward as we develop these projects. And most of these projects need local use permits from the county, so we'll have to go through a process where there's public hearings for projects in order to obtain approval from the localities in order to develop projects. And then as we go through the life cycle process and nearing construction, we'll continue to hold things like open houses to keep the public updated on the progress of projects and to inform them of any changes or what may be coming in the near future as we develop, prepare, and construct our projects.
Thank you, Erich. This next question is directed to both of you. What are some of the biggest challenges Dominion Energy faces when developing and interconnecting solar projects, and how are these challenges being addressed? Mike, I'll start with you. Erich, please feel free to add your thoughts as well.
From an interconnection perspective, some of the biggest challenges, like I mentioned earlier, the interconnection request process is highly regulated, and there are prescriptive process by which we administer in order to identify, the grid and protection modifications that are needed. Each interconnection request gets a site-specific customized study that can take anywhere from 10 to 16 months to complete, depending upon the complexity of the interconnection, the modifications that are identified during the study process, and the questions that the interconnection customer may have as a result of the study process. That time frame can be a challenge for a customer to have to go through who's developing a project, and certainly defer to Erich for more insight on the customer side of the interconnection. But on the utility side, that study process is highly critical in order to ensure the safety of the interconnection for all customers. Along with the time frame that's involved in implementing the studies that are identified in the regulations, the grid and protection modifications have a significant cost. It's not unusual for an interconnection to require several miles of circuit to be reconductored. We have several that require the upgrade of transformers and substations, and the estimated cost associated with those are assigned to the interconnection customer who triggers the need for the modification. And that can run into potentially millions of dollars, again, depending upon the magnitude of upgrades that are required and identified through the study process. So I would say that those are a couple of the largest challenges that we have in administering and trying to help interconnection customers manage expectations as they go through the interconnection study process. But Erich, your thoughts from the customer side of the interconnection?
Interconnection, I think, is one piece of kind of the multi-leg stool that make up a good solar project as we look and screen for those to develop. Virginia as a whole is more challenging to construct solar than you would see like go out west, where you have large tracts of big, flat, dry land. And Virginia, as we know, is beautiful rolling hills and beautiful landscape, and that presents challenges from topography, geotechnical conditions, environmental constraints, and interconnection being kind of another leg of that stool, as Mike talked about. So those are all kind of factors we have to take into consideration. So one of our biggest challenges that we have is kind of balancing all those factors as we kind of screen projects to ensure that we're finding projects that meet the requirements from a buildability and a constructability, but also are the optimum from a cost and schedule perspective for interconnection. So as we kind of go along the project life cycle, we're having to continually kind of balance and evaluate and look at how schedules line up for things like the interconnection process, the development process, the permitting process, as well as kind of looking at those factors which we know are going to bring us the best project, the lowest cost for our customers. So, we're continuing to refine processes to screen and evaluate projects as we go along. As we build more and more projects, we're kind of taking the best projects, and then we're finding and sorting through the projects which may not have as many of the great characteristics. We're balancing those risks as we go forward. So that's I think that's our biggest challenge, is just balancing all of those different factors which go into developing, constructing, and operating a great and the lowest cost solar projects for our customers. Interconnection being one of those key factors in that.
Such great perspectives from both of you. Thank you, Mike and Erich. Now, the last question is also directed to both of you. What innovations or technologies are being explored to improve the efficiency and reliability of solar project portfolios, and how will these advancements benefit our customers? Erich, I'll continue with you, and Mike, please add your thoughts.
Absolutely. We're always continuously exploring ways to improve the way we develop, construct, and operate our solar fleet, whether it's, looking at different methodologies for how we develop, looking at different technologies, focusing on kind of operational performance and how we go back and improve that kind of cyclically through design. So bringing the lessons learned we have from our operations team all the way back to how we start and develop projects. And then we're also kind of looking at kind of innovative ways. One I love to touch on, because it's a great story, but it also is kind of bringing in a really kind of brought an innovative mindset towards the operation of our solar projects, is touching on how we do vegetation management, and a pilot that we recently had on bringing in sheep to graze to manage the vegetation on our project. So vegetation management, which sometimes is kind of a fancy word for saying, cutting the grass, but typically on a solar project, you're managing the vegetation through mechanical means, going out with lawnmowers and mowing the grass. That's critical to our operations to ensure that we have the vegetation on our sites managed in an effective way, is to not interfere with the operations of projects. But we have been running a pilot at a collection of our sites where we're bringing in herds of sheep to essentially, graze on the vegetation and keep the vegetation down. And it's a great way, one, to reduce emissions because you don't have as many of mechanical equipment out there that's your typical vegetation management equipment. But it's also a great way to partner with the local communities. A lot of the potential opportunities for local sheep herds or local shepherds to come on site and utilize the vastness of our solar land to graze their sheep. So it's really a great opportunity for us to pilot and explore, what I'll call an innovative and alternative way to manage vegetation at our sites.
And Nadia, from the interconnection perspective, our process is highly regulated. So, our primary focus is to try to provide information to the interconnection customers as they go through the study process so that they can make educated business decisions, regarding their generator projects. But, some of the concepts and methodologies that we have tried to modify in order to give customers additional options. Last year for our Virginia queue, we developed a online application submittal process. Historically, the customer would be submitting a hard copy packet, their interconnection request form, their generator information, inverter specifications, site plan, site layout. All that would be sent through the mail to our corporate office in Richmond. But last year, we developed a process where interconnection customers can submit that information online along with making their application payments as long as they have their bank routing information and their bank account number available when they submit the online submittal. But that was intended for a couple of reasons. One is to primarily give customers another option by which they can submit the interconnection request packet. We have gotten requests over the years if there's an electronic means of making the application payments. And historically, we've had to say, regrettably, no, only a hard copy check. But this online submittal process gives, another option to customers, who are desiring to go through this interconnection request process. And as we gain more experience with it, for our Virginia queue, our intent is to roll it out for, our North Carolina interconnection customers as well. In addition, we are seeking ways that we can review our infrastructure and protection guidelines to look at new technologies. For example, for net metering customers that are between 250 kW and 1 megawatt, via a motion for interim authority that we submitted to the State Corporation Commission in Virginia and got approved toward the end of last year, we are pursuing the development of a dual carrier cellular direct transfer trip communications methodology. If direct transfer trip is required, which it's a high-speed protection system that's designed to get the generation off the system as fast as possible if there is a problem with the system or a fault, such as a vehicle hitting a pole. We try to remove all power sources in order to protect personnel, the public, and equipment. But our general communication requirement that the customer is to provide is a fiber-based communication medium that they would provide, which can be very expensive to install. So this dual carrier cellular is something that we are field testing for the mid-size net metering category of customer. And while we don't expect it to have exactly the reliability of fiber, because fiber is extremely reliable, we are optimistic about performance expectations. And one of the advantages that we anticipate is the equipment that the customer is required to pay for dual carrier cellular would be less expensive than if they had to install a fiber-based communication medium. So constantly looking for technology improvements that could still ensure the safety, reliability of the grid, but yet give interconnection customers hopefully another option in order to help their projects move forward.
I'd like to thank Mike Nestor and Erich Fritz for their expertise, time, and participation. Thanks for listening, and be on the lookout for future episodes. I'm Nadia Ely.